Statement of Financial Position discussed by Group Tenacity.
Financial position ang nagko-compromise ng mga financial statements, statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, changes in equity, and statement of cash flows. Tinutulungan nito ang mga creditors and investors sa kanilang decision-making process. For example, si Mr. D ay gustong i-invest ang pera niya kay Company A, so kailangan niya muna makita if the company is gaining profit over the year. So paano? Siyempre, through financial statements. Financial statement have two types of comparability. The first one is intra-comparability na kung saan pinagko-compare ang financial statement ng isang company or entity sa magkabilang period. For example, si Company ABC ay merong 2019 at 2020 na comparability na financial statement, isang company but different period. The second one is the intercomparability na kung saan ang comparability ay sa dalawang magkabilang company. For example, Company ABC at Company XYZ na may parehas sa 2020 financial statement. According to PAS 1.9, ang financial statements ay isang structure representation of an entity financial position. Structure representation dahil financial statement represent the result of their operation at ito ay may sinusunod na format kaya tinawag na structure. Merong primary purpose at secondary purpose ang financial statement. Nakapaloob sa primary objective ang to provide information about the financial position, financial performance at cash flows ng isang company. It will serve as basis sa pagkakaroon ng economic decision for future period. Secondary objective is to show result of management stewardship over the entity's resources. It means that management stewardship reflects to transparency and availability of the information of an entity. The complete set of financial statement consists of statement of financial position, statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flow, notes, and additional statement of financial position. Each financial statement was different to other financial statement because magkakaiba sila na information at use nito. We will elaborate each financial statement later. Fair presentation and compliance with PFRS. The application of PFRS with additional disclosure when necessary is presumed to result in financial statements that achieve a fair presentation. Ang sinasabi lang dito na it's faithfully represented kapag it is in accordance with the definition and recognition criteria ng asset, liabilities, income, and expenses na sinet ng conceptual framework and accounting standards. So dito, dapat hindi ka bias or wala ka tiyatago kapag gumawa ka ng financial statement ng company. As an accountant, kailangan natin ipakita yung fair, accurate, and transparency ng isang FS. Wala dapat tayong binabawas or dinadagdag para lang maipakita na maganda ang financial performance ng company. Compliance with the standards is presumed to result in fairly presented FS. Fairly presentation also requires the proper selection and application of accounting policies. Question: what if hindi pasok or hindi tugma sa form ng business mo yung accounting policy? Pwede ba mag-depart or hindi sundin exactly yung nakalagay sa standards? The answer is yes. Sinasabi sa ating standard na password na pinapayagan ng isang entity to depart from PFRS requirements if the said regulatory framework allows it. Next, an entity is permitted to depart from standard if in extremely rare circumstances and if compliance with the standard would be misleading. So, syempre, if diswalking standard sa business mo, then dito lang pwede payagan mag-depart ang entity. Basta ilalagay or i-disclose ito sa notes. So, ano ba yung mga kailangan i-disclose sa notes? Una, you must disclose the management conclusion that FS are fairly presented. Next, kailangan nakasaad dito yung mga standard na applicable at ginamit ng entity. Lastly, if nag-depart ka, kailangan nakasaad yung title ng standard kung saan ka nag-depart at reason kung bakit if you comply with it will result to misleading. Next is kailangan naka-indicate din dito yung financial effect ng departure. Going concern. So normally, financial statements are prepared on a going concern basis. Paano mo malalaman if going concern ng isang business? Going concern ng isang entity if it has a history of profitable operations and ready access to financial resources. Also, an entity is assumed to continue to exist for an indefinite period of time. The opposite of going concern is liquidating concern. In this case, an entity intends to liquidate or to cease trading and has no choice but to do so. The assessment of going concern is at least 12 months from the reporting date. Accrual basis of accounting. An entity shall prepare its financial statement using the accrual basis of accounting except for the statement of cash flows. Under accrual basis of accounting, economic events are recorded in the period in which they occur rather than at the point in time when they affect cash. Thus, income is recognized when it is earned rather than collected, while expenses are recognized if incurred, even if it's not yet paid. Opposite of accrual basis is cash basis, but the standard says that we must use accrual basis of accounting. Materiality and aggregation. So first, let's define what is materiality. An item is considered material if yung omission or misstatement niya could influence economic decision of users. So, ibig sabihin lang dito na material ang transaction mo if may malaking impact ito sa economic decision ng company. But if di maapektuhan yung decision ng user, then immaterial siya. Next, materiality depend on relative size rather than absolute size. Ibig sabihin, if ang isang transaction ay material sa isang company, maaaring sa ibang company, immaterial siya kasi materiality depend on size. For example, if your company is big in nature and the disposal of office supplies like staplers, scratch paper, etc. is immaterial since it would not affect the decision of users. But if the field of your business is a printing press and every disposal of defect and worn out supplies is material to you since losing such supplies could affect the profitability and performance of your business. Next is aggregation. Each material class of similar items is presented separately. For example, cash, cash on hand, cash in bank, and cash equivalents. So, if in-aggregate mo siya, kasama siya sa line item ng cash and cash equivalents. Next is the similar items are presented separately unless they are immaterial. So, ibig sabihin, kapag magkakaiba or dissimilar siya, may separate siyang line item. But if immaterial siya, then those immaterial items are aggregated with other items. Example of it is trade and other receivable. Offsetting. Asset and liabilities or income and expenses are presented separately and shall not be offset unless required and permitted by PFRS. So here, mag-offset ka lang if it's permitted by the standards and when it reflects the substance of the transaction. Example of it is when presenting gains or losses from sales. So here we get the net amount of the related selling expenses. Another one is we get the net amount of unrealized gains and losses arising from trading securities from translation of foreign currency denominated assets and liabilities except if they are material. And lastly, when presenting a loss from provision, net of a reimbursement from a third party. Note that measuring assets net of valuation allowance is not offsetting. For example, deducting allowance from doubtful accounts from accounts receivable or deducting accumulated depreciation from building accounts. Frequency of reporting. Ang nire-require lang ng standard is reporting of financial statement are done at least annually. If nag-change ng reporting period ang isang entity, then it must be disclosed. Ang mga didi-disclose natin is yung period covered ng ating FS. Next, syempre, kailangan mo ipaliwanag kung bakit kailangan mo baguhin yung reporting period mo, either shorter or longer period. And lastly, the fact that amounts are presented in the FS are not entirely comparable. Comparative information. Pass 1 requires an entity to present comparative information in respect of the preceding period for all amounts reported in the current period financial statements unless another PFRS requires otherwise. So here, if gagawa ka ng comparative information, dapat kung annual yung FS ng current year mo, dapat annual din yung sa preceding year na ipipresenta mo. Pass 1 also permits entities to provide comparative information in addition to the minimum requirement. Consistency of presentation. An entity shall retain the presentation and classification of items in the financial statement from one period to the next, unless a change of presentation is required by PFRS or results in information that is reliable and more relevant. Sinasabi lang dito na dapat consistent tayo sa ating accounting methods and practices. If ang ginamit mo ay PFRS, then dapat hanggang dulo PFRS pa rin ang gagamitin mo. If GAAP, then GAAP pa rin. Dapat maging consistent tayo sa ating ginagamit para hindi magkaroon ng confusion sa ating FS. There must be a consistency unless a change in presentation is required by PFRS or it results in information that is reliable and more relevant. So kapag may bagong inilabas na accounting policy si PFRS at nire-record tayo, then dun pa lang natin kailangan baguhin yung ating presentation or ipinakita kang mas appropriate and fit na accounting method sa iyong FS. Dito, maaari mong baguhin yung way of presentation mo pero dapat yung effect nito sa iyong FS ay magre-resulta sa more accurate, relevant, and reliable information. As mentioned earlier, a complete set of financial statements includes an additional statement of financial position when certain instances occur, like when the entity applies an accounting policy retrospectively and when the instances in A have a material effect on the information in the statement of financial position at the beginning of the preceding period. For example, if any of the instances earlier occur, the entity shall present restatement of financial position na nasa table. We all are familiar with the structure and content of financial material and we're somehow pro in using this. It is a must to know about this dahil lagi itong ginagamit in making financial position. The first thing is the name of the group or the company, as for example shows ABC Company. Next to it is the statement of financial position, then the date of the end of financial position, at ang panghuli ay yung level of rounding off and presentation of currency. Is it in thousand or such? The statement of financial position shows the entity's financial condition or status of assets, liabilities, and equity. These are the PPE, investment property, intangible assets, financial assets, investments, biological asset, inventory, trade and other receivables, provisions, financial liabilities, current tax liabilities and asset, deferred tax liabilities and asset. Liabilities include in disposal group, non-controlling interest, and issue capital and reserve attribute to owners of the parent. A statement of financial position may be presented as either classified and unclassified. Classified kapag may distinction between current and non-current asset and liabilities. Kapag naman unclassified, ito naman yung walang distinction between sa current and non-current items. At tulad sa table, pinaghihiwalay ang current asset and non-current asset sa classified at sama-sama ang lahat ng account sa unclassified. Current assets are assets that are expected to be realized, sold, or consumed in the entity's normal operating cycle or within 12 months. Assets that are held primarily for trading are considered as current even if they are expected to be realized or settled beyond 12 months after reporting period. Assets that do not form part of the entity's normal operating cycle are presented as current only when they are expected to be realized within 12 months after the reporting period, and cash equivalent unless restricted to from being exchanged or used to settle a liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. Current liabilities are liabilities that are expected to be settled in the entity's normal operating cycle, held primarily for trading, due to be settled within 12 months after the reporting period, and when the entity does not have an unconditional right to defer settlement of the liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. Refinancing agreement. Once na mag-mature yung long-term obligation within 12 months after the reporting period, i-consider siyang current kahit non-current pa yung obligation. As a general rule, once na yung obligation natin is currently maturing, it is classified as current kahit na nakumpleto na yung payment on a long-term basis after a reporting period. Refinancing agreement has two exemptions. First, kinaklasify as non-current ang refinancing agreement once na ito ay fully completed na on or before the reporting date. Secondly, once the entity expect and has the discretion to refinance it on a long-term basis under existing loan facility, then the obligation is classified as non-current. Liabilities payable on demand. As a general rule, a liability is considered or classified as current liability kapag ito ay payable on demand. Exemptions. It is presented as non-current liability if the lender provides the entity on or before the reporting period a grace period ending at least 12 months after the reporting date to rectify a breach of loan provision and during which the lender cannot demand immediate repayment. Presentation of deferred tax. In a classified statement of financial position, the deferred tax liabilities or assets must be presented as non-current items. In the illustrative problem, the adjusted trial balance of Friendships Co. as of December 31, 2000x1 is shown below. As we all know, ang pag-prepare ng trial balance, first na inilalagay ay ang mga assets. Under this is yung mga current asset, followed by non-current assets. Next are liabilities from current to non-current liabilities. Then equity, income, and expense. Dito, makikita natin ang mga accounts lang na dapat i-input in preparing financial position. First are the assets. Under it are current and non-current asset. So, kailangan din natin siyang i-total. Next are the liabilities from current to non-current liabilities. Then, i-total lang din natin siya. And last is the total equity. Afterwards, i-check natin kapag inad ang total liabilities sa total equity ay equal siya sa total assets.